If you told me a year ago that my husband's funeral would be the day I learned the truth about my marriage, I would have laughed. Nervously, maybe, but I would have laughed. I had always believed that grief came in waves, crashing in suddenly, leaving you breathless. But that morning, as I stood in the front of Gracewood Chapel with Richard's urn on a velvet draped table beside me, all I felt was numb. Not devastation, not sorrow, just a hollow sort of stillness, like my body knew something my heart hadn't caught up with yet. The sanctuary smelled faintly of lilies and old hymn books. The carpet was maroon, the pews too stiff, and the air conditioning worked just hard enough to make my skin prickle. People whispered around me. In that hush they save for tragedy. I nodded when they offered condolences, said thank you 100 times, and avoided mirrors because I didn't want to see what my own face looked like in mourning. Richard's photo was up front, our favorite from Asheville, taken 5 summers ago. He had that little squint in his left eye, the one I used to tease him about. He always said it was the sun. I always knew it was the bourbon. I kept scanning the rows as guests filed in, pretending to look for someone in particular. The truth is, I was just hoping it would all start to make sense. That someone would take my hand and explain how this man I had loved, raised a daughter with buried parents alongside, could be dead without giving me any warning. And then she walked in. It was like the temperature in the room shifted. Heads turned, conversations paused. She was tall, elegant, and wearing navy, a bold color for a funeral, I thought, even as I admired how effortlessly she wore it. Her heels clicked softly against the tile floor, and behind her walked a boy in a pressed white shirt and a girl with braids and nervous eyes. My heart stalled. The boy, he had Richard's mouth, his ears, that cowlick on the left side that never lay flat. I had combed that same stubborn swirl down on our daughter when she was 5, before her first day of kindergarten. The service began. I couldn't tell you a word of it. The pastor droned about community and love, and the legacy Richard left behind. But all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. I was barely breathing, holding tight to the program like it might anchor me. The receiving line after the service moved slowly. People I barely remembered hugged me, mentioned how proud Richard had always been of his girls. Someone, probably one of his old business partners, whispered, "You were lucky to have him," and I almost laughed out loud. Lucky? When I finally stepped aside for a breath, she approached. She didn't wait for an introduction. "Eleanor," she said smoothly. Her voice had a kind of confidence that made my skin itch. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "My loss." "Thank you," I said, polite but guarded. "Have we met?" She offered a gentle smile. "Not formally. My name is Delilah." She gestured to the children. "And these are my kids, Jacob and Lila." The names meant nothing to me, but the implication hit like ice water. My knees wobbled. She waited like she'd practiced this. They're Richard's children. Everything around me seemed to slow down. The rustle of coats, the clink of a dropped coffee spoon, the chatter in the next room. And in the center of it all, Delilah, cool and composed, standing next to 2 children who bore the unmistakable stamp of my dead husband's genes. I stepped away, not out of anger, not yet, just shock. Carol found me in the hallway, near the coat rack where Richard used to hang his awful brown blazer. "Nora," she whispered. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no words came. Later, much later, when the casseroles were wrapped in foil and the sympathy cards lay unopened in a stack by the coffee pot, I sat alone at our kitchen table. The house was too quiet, but not in a peaceful way. In a final way. On the table sat a manila envelope the lawyer had handed me after the service. "Richard's latest update," he said. 3 months ago. He didn't mention it. No, he hadn't. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was his updated will. He had left Delilah a house in Wilmington, a beachfront property, a trust fund for each child, college funds, life insurance, investments. To me, he left the house we shared, already straining under a second mortgage, and a small policy to cover burial costs. No personal letter, no explanation. 32 years. I had ironed his shirts, raised our daughter, slept beside a man who, it turned out, had built an entire other life behind my back. And all I got was debt. I folded the will, placed it back in the envelope, and set it in the center of the table. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary, and I drank every drop because something inside me was stirring, and it wasn't grief. The next morning, I woke to silence. No snoring, no coffee brewing, no rustling of the newspaper. The house felt both too small and too vast, like an echo chamber of lies. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, wearing Richard's old flannel robe. I had kept it on the back of the bathroom door for years, even after he stopped using it. Habit is a funny thing. It clings, even when love doesn't. The will still sat on the table, a quiet intruder. I couldn't bring myself to read it again, not yet. So instead, I brewed coffee and stared out the window at the garden. His tomatoes, my marigolds. We used to joke that we kept the marriage going by staying on opposite sides of the yard. That afternoon, I drove to the lawyer's office, an aging beige building with ivy creeping up one side and a too enthusiastic receptionist who chirped, "Miss Eleanor, come on in. Mr. Glass is expecting you." Mr. Glass, a man in suspenders who smelled faintly of lemon polish and regret, adjusted his glasses as I sat. "I suppose you have questions." I didn't answer. I just pulled the will from my purse and slid it across his desk. "I'd like to know how long you've known about them." He winced. "Delilah and the children?" "About 6 years." 6 years. I let that hang in the air, sharp and dangerous. I advised Richard to disclose things sooner. He said he would. Clearly, Mr. Glass, trailed off. "Did they know about me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes, Delilah was aware you were legally married. So I was the side dish on his full-course meal of domestic bliss?" His lips tightened. "I understand this is difficult." "No," I interrupted. "Difficult is the time I sat in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours while he had his gallbladder out, worrying myself sick. Difficult is hosting Christmas dinner for 30 while he worked late. This," I picked up the will, waved it once. "This is betrayal wrapped in ribbon." He had the decency not to argue. "There's more," he said after a pause. "There's a safe deposit box. Richard added your name to it, but only last year. We don't know what's in it." Something in his voice made my stomach drop. "Where is it?" "First Federal Bank. Downtown branch." I left without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in the garage, the car keys in my lap. I hadn't been able to cry. I wondered if there was something broken in me, or maybe something had just calcified over time. A crust of disappointment so thick, tears couldn't get through. The next day, I drove to First Federal. The manager, a kind man with careful eyes, led me to a quiet room with a thick door and a colder breeze than necessary. The box wasn't large, just one of those mid-sized rectangles tucked into the wall. He left me alone with it. Inside were 4 things: a bundle of old photographs, a manila envelope, a gold necklace I didn't recognize, and a single key with a red plastic tag. I looked at the photos first. Delilah, younger, laughing, holding a newborn, the boy. Another of her and Richard, standing on the Wilmington beach, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The date in the corner said 2011. I felt sick. I opened the envelope last. Inside, I found property documents, but not for the Wilmington house. This was different. A small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, paid in full, deeded not to Delilah, not to me, to a trust with my name as the trustee. I flipped to the next page. A handwritten letter from Richard. Brief, sloppy. "Nora, I meant to tell you sooner. I just didn't know how. The trust is for Lila and Jacob. If anything happens to me, I want them cared for. Delilah's not great with money. I thought well, you've always been better at holding things together. I'm sorry for everything. The nerve, the audacity. Not only had he kept an entire second family secret, he wanted me to manage their future. I laughed, out loud, alone in a freezing vault in a bank basement. When I got home, I poured another glass of wine and looked around the living room. The throw pillows I'd hand-sewn, the photo albums, the souvenirs from our romantic trips. All of it set dressing for a performance I didn't even know I was giving. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a list of every question. every inconsistency, every unexplained absence, and then I started writing back. To Delilah. I still had the guest book from the funeral. She'd signed it, full name, and next to it, her email address. The subject line was simple: we need to talk. Delilah responded within the hour. Of course, just say when and where. No hesitation, no defensiveness. I hated how gracious she sounded. Like she was the wrong party, not the one who'd shared a bed with my husband while I was home making casseroles and folding his socks. I chose a neutral spot, the Red Fern Cafe on McKinley Street. Cozy, public, the kind of place where no one raised an eyebrow if you cried into your coffee. I got there early, sat at a table by the window, and watched the steam rise from my mug of Earl Grey. My fingers drummed the side of the porcelain, my wedding ring glinting under the overhead light. I hadn't taken it off yet. Couldn't. Not until I understood who exactly I'd been married to. Delilah arrived right on time. She wore a soft gray coat belted at the waist, not a wrinkle on her. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup understated, but flawless. She looked like someone who always knew where the exits were. She spotted me, offered a tentative smile, and walked over. I didn't stand. "Eleanor," she said, pulling off her gloves, "thank you for reaching out." I nodded toward the opposite chair. "Sit. Let's not pretend this is a reunion." To her credit, she didn't flinch. She ordered chamomile tea when the waitress came by, then folded her hands in her lap. "I assume you have questions." "That's an understatement." She nodded, then took a slow sip of her tea once it arrived. "Ask." I stared at her, unsure where to begin. "How long were you with him?" Her gaze didn't waver. 12 years. My chest tightened. 12. He told me he was separated, that you lived in different cities, that the marriage was over in everything but paperwork. I believed him. And the kids? I asked, struggling to keep my voice calm. He was in their lives. Not always consistently, but he was present. He loved them. They loved him. The betrayal hit again, fresh and cruel. Not only had Richard cheated, he had been a father. Again, a version of himself I barely recognized. "Did he ever tell you about me?" "The real story." "Eventually," she admitted. "About 5 years ago. He said he didn't know how to leave, that it had gone on too long, and he didn't want to hurt anyone." I nearly choked. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He made me plan our anniversary, dinner the same year your daughter was born. Delilah looked down at her hands. "I didn't come today to defend him. I came because I know this situation is untenable. For both of us." I scoffed. "Do you know he left me the house and the debt, and left you and the kids a trust, 2 properties, and investments I never knew existed?" She nodded. "He told me he would set up a fund for the kids. I didn't know how much. I didn't ask." "Well, congratulations," I said, voice cold. "Your children are set for life. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in a house with a leaky roof and a mortgage that won't pay itself." Delilah flinched. "I'm not the enemy, Eleanor." "No." I leaned in. "Then tell me why he made me the trustee of their trust. Tell me why, after a lifetime of secrets, he decided I should clean up his mess." Delilah's mouth tightened. "Because he trusted you." That was the cruelest line of all. We sat in silence. Her tea had gone cold. My heart had gone colder. Finally, I asked, "Did he love you?" Her eyes filled for the first time. She nodded once, a quick, painful motion. "And did he love me?" She hesitated. I think he loved both of us. Differently. And badly." I stood then, slipping my coat over my shoulders. "You're right about one thing. This isn't sustainable." She looked up, hopeful. "So what do we do?" I paused, hand on the back of the chair. "We survive him." As I walked out into the winter air, the sky broke open with a cold drizzle. I didn't bother with my umbrella. Let the rain come. Let it wash away everything I thought I knew. Because Richard's story was over. But mine was just beginning. A week after tea with Delilah, I found myself back in Mr. Glass's office, staring at the manila envelope like it was a live wire. "This isn't about grief," I told him. "This is about truth." He gave me that solemn, practiced nod lawyers use when they know a storm's brewing and their job is just to stay dry. "There are more documents," he said, sliding another folder across the desk. Richard kept a private account for nearly 2 decades, under a different name. We found it when the bank flagged some of his old transactions. I opened the folder. There were statements from a private investment account, one I'd never seen, in a name I didn't recognize, N.R. Thatcher. Inside was over $2.3 million. I blinked. Who is N.R. Thatcher? Glass adjusted his glasses. It was a pseudonym, likely for privacy. He listed himself as the primary holder, but your social security number was attached as a beneficiary. My breath caught. So that money, legally yours. The words didn't comfort me. They chilled me. That kind of secret didn't come without shadows. Did Delilah know about this? He shook his head. Unlikely. It appears she was never listed. Only you. It didn't make sense. He left her children homes, trusts. But this hidden wealth? It was earmarked for me. Why? I whispered. Glass leaned back. You'd have to ask him. I didn't laugh. It wasn't funny. Back home, I sat at the dining room table. The statements fanned out in front of me. My daughter, Jess, called while I was still staring at the numbers. Hey, Mom, she said, chipper, not knowing the grenade that had just exploded in my inbox. You holding up okay? I swallowed. I'm managing. You know you can stay with us for a while. I mean, just until you get your footing. It was kind, but the kind of kindness that didn't come without conditions. Jess loved me, but her husband Dan didn't love me being around. He liked things neat, quiet, minimal. I was none of those things right now. No, honey. I've got things to handle here. You sure? Very. After we hung up, I poured a second cup of coffee and called the bank. Transferred the account under my real name. They'd need signatures, of course, and ID, and maybe a few awkward questions, but it was mine now. And then, as I stared at that absurd number on the screen, $2,312,811, I did something strange. I laughed, not because I was happy, not because the betrayal had softened, but because it was so perfectly Richard. He couldn't bring himself to leave her. But he couldn't bring himself to leave me with nothing either. I thought about Delilah, about those kids, about the look on her face when she said, he trusted you. He did, and he didn't. The next day, I drove to Wilmington. Not to see the beachfront property, I wasn't ready for that yet, but to drive past it. To understand what kind of life he had built in secret while I was home folding laundry and balancing the checkbook. The house was lovely. Blue shutters, wraparound porch, wind chimes on the back deck. I parked across the street and just watched for a while. A golden retriever played in the front yard. Lila came out to call it in. She looked like Jess did at that age, legs too long for her body, always a bit off balance. It hurt, how familiar she felt. Delilah came out a few moments later. She didn't see me. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. They had their lives. I had mine. And finally, I was free to decide what that meant. When I got home that evening, I pulled the dusty notebook from the bottom drawer of the desk, the one I used to write grocery lists and scraps of poetry I never shared. I opened to a blank page and wrote, in big block letters, what do I want? Not what Richard wanted, not what Jess needed, not what the world expected from a widow who just discovered her husband was a liar with a secret family and a hidden fortune. No. For once in my life, the question was mine to answer, and I intended to take my time. The lake house wasn't on the map. Not literally, of course. It was there, a neat little pin drop on the GPS, nestled off Route 46 near an old trailhead lined with pine. But it wasn't on the map of my marriage. Not once had Richard mentioned a cabin in the woods. Not during our fights, not during his quiet spells, not during the rare moments when we sat on the porch with wine and pretended we still had things to talk about. I found the deed at the bottom of the file folder. A small 2-bedroom lakefront property in my name. Purchased 6 years ago. Paid in full. I drove out on a Wednesday, just after dawn. The road twisted and dipped like it had secrets of its own. The trees were just starting to blush with autumn. I half expected the house to be a dump, some fixer-upper he bought on a whim. But when I pulled into the gravel driveway, I saw a freshly painted porch, clean gutters, and a welcome mat that read, "Just breathe." The key from the safety deposit box fit the lock. The door creaked open, and I stepped into a silence that felt sacred. It was beautiful, simple, wooden floors, a fireplace, worn leather chairs arranged in a perfect little circle. The kitchen smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. A photo on the mantel caught my eye. Me, not Delilah, not the kids. Me, from years ago, smiling under a red umbrella on our trip to Portland. I had forgotten that photo even existed. He hadn't. Next to it, a thick envelope. My name written in pen I recognized immediately. His blocky, precise scrawl. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. Walked around. There was no TV. No Wi-Fi. Just a record player and a stack of old jazz albums we used to play when we were young enough to dance without irony. Finally, I sat down and opened the envelope. Inside were several pages. A letter. And a confession. Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you probably hate me. I wouldn't blame you. There's no way to make this right. But I'm hoping to make some kind of peace. The house is yours. I bought it for you. It was always meant for you. A place where you didn't have to take care of anyone but yourself. I wanted to give you that, even if I didn't deserve to. I was a coward. I should have told you about Delilah. About the kids. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself from the fallout. You were always stronger than me, even when you didn't know it. You're the reason I became anything at all. Every success I had started with you. Every decent thing I ever did came from watching you love people, even when they didn't deserve it. I'm sorry for the lies, for the time, for not being the man I should have been. But I hope this house gives you something you haven't had in a long time. A place to just be. Love. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the letter or burn it or bury it in the backyard. I just sat there. Let the warmth from the tea seep into my hands. Let the silence wrap around me like a familiar coat. That evening, I lit a fire, played a Billie Holiday record, cooked pasta with sauce from a jar, and ate it barefoot by the window while the lake shimmered silver under the rising moon. No one called. No one needed me. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. Whatever came next, Delilah, the kids, the estate, could wait. Because here, in this house built on betrayal but gifted with an apology, I had found something unexpected. A beginning. It had been 3 weeks since I first stepped into the lake house, and already it felt more like home than the house I'd shared with Richard for 32 years. There was something about the quiet that healed me. No buzzing phones. No one asking what's for dinner. Just me, a pot of coffee, and a sky full of stars I hadn't taken time to look at in decades. Then Jess called. I just think it would be good for you to come, she said, her voice tight with that practiced tone adult children use when they're trying to guilt their parents. The kids miss you. I miss them too, but she hadn't said that until now. And Dan? I asked, keeping my voice even. A pause. He's fine with it. Fine. That word again. I'll think about it, I said. Text me the time. I went. Not for Jess. Not for Dan. For the grandkids. Their faces lit up when I walked through the door. And for a moment, everything else melted away. We played Go Fish. Laughed at jokes that made no sense. And for one blissful hour, I wasn't the betrayed widow. I was just grandma. But then dinner happened. Dan poured wine without asking if I still drank red. Jess passed the salad, like she was offering a peace treaty wrapped in arugula. And then came the question, casual but carefully placed. So, have you figured out what you're doing with the money? Dan asked. I didn't look up from my plate. What money? The inheritance. The trust. Jess said there's a lot. I set my fork down. And what exactly do you think I should do with it? Jess shifted uncomfortably. He just means it's a lot to manage alone. Maybe talk to a financial advisor. Or, someone who can help. You mean someone like you? I asked, smiling politely. Someone who can help me access it? Dan's face flushed. That's not what Because I've had a lot of help lately, I said, folding my napkin. Richard helped himself to a second life. Delilah helped raise his other children. And now it seems everyone wants to help me spend his leftovers. Jess's face crumpled. Mom, I came for the kids, I said quietly. But if this is about the money, Let's not pretend it's a family dinner. Dan cleared his throat, muttered something about needing air, and left the table. Jess stayed. She looked at me, really looked for the first time in years. You're angry, she whispered. No, I said. I'm done being quiet. I kissed my grandkids goodnight, told them I loved them, and then I left, my back straight, my voice steady, my heart racing with a clarity I hadn't felt since Richards will crack my life in two. Back at the lake house, I built a fire. Not because it was cold, but because I liked the way it roared. The way it claimed space unapologetically. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Mr. Glass. I want to update my own will, I said. He didn't ask questions, just gave me a date and time. I knew exactly who I wanted in it, and who I didn't. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon oil and dust, like old secrets and fresh starts. Mr. Glass greeted me with a gentle smile and a stack of forms, but I'd brought my own notes. My handwriting was sharp and clean. No room for ambiguity, no cracks where someone could slip in later and say, "But didn't she mean?" I meant every word. I want the lake house held in a separate trust, I told him, handing over the documents. It goes to my grandchildren. All of them. He raised an eyebrow. All of them. Mine and Richard's. A pause. Delilah's kids? I nodded. They didn't ask for any of this. They're innocent. And they're part of my story now, whether I like it or not. He didn't question it further. Just made a note and moved on. By the time I left the office, the autumn wind had picked up. It tugged at my scarf, whispered through the trees like it carried every version of the woman I used to be. I went back to the lake house and sat on the porch. The leaves were gold and rust and fire red. I thought about calling Jess, but decided against it. She'd hear soon enough. Instead, I called Delilah. Can you talk? I asked when she picked up. A pause. Of course. I'm leaving the lake house to the kids, I said. All 4 of them. She didn't speak right away. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I replied. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't lie to them. Not about who Richard was. Let them know the truth. Good, bad, all of it. Don't sugarcoat the man who built 2 lives on half-truths. I promise, she said, her voice cracking. I want them to remember me as someone who did the right thing, I added. Even if I was late to the party. Delilah cried. I didn't. I hung up and sat with the silence. I liked it more now. It didn't scare me the way it used to. It was no longer the absence of something. It was the presence of peace. That night, I pulled out the photo albums. Not the ones Richard had curated. The ones I kept hidden in the cedar chest. The real ones. I wrote names and dates on the backs of photos, tucked letters into the sleeves, and made a new scrapbook, one for the grandchildren. All of them. I included stories. Of the diner where I worked before Jess was born. Of the time Richard broke the lawnmower and blamed the dog. Of our honeymoon that got rained out, but still ended in laughter. And I wrote this line on the first page. This is the truth. The beautiful, complicated, painful truth. I hope you grow strong enough to live your own without apology. The truth had taken everything from me. And then, slowly, it gave something back. A future. A few weeks later, I invited them all to the lake house. Jess was the first to respond with a cautious, "Is this a peace talk or a trap?" I replied, "Neither. It's a table. Come sit." Delilah texted next. "We'll be there." The kids would like that. The day was overcast, the sky stitched with soft gray clouds. I wore a soft cream sweater, one of Richard's old favorites. The irony didn't escape me. The house smelled of baked apples and cinnamon. I needed it to smell like warmth, like safety, like forgiveness. Jess and the boys arrived first. She brought store-bought cookies, which was unlike her, and a candle from one of those fancy shops. "It smells like eucalyptus and olive branches," she said. "Symbolic?" I smiled. "Let's just say it's a start." Delilah arrived shortly after, holding Lila's hand and carrying a dish of macaroni and cheese. She insisted, Delilah said, nodding at her daughter. Said it was only polite to bring something. "Then she's already ahead of most adults I know," I replied. We sat around the long wooden table I'd polished that morning, with mismatched chairs and hand-me-down plates. No formality. No scripts. Just us. The kids bonded fast. Children have a way of cutting through tension with laughter and loud voices. They chased each other through the yard, played card games on the porch, and made up songs I hoped would never leave my head. Jess and Delilah were more cautious, like women dancing around a bruise. We kept the conversation light, until Jess, watching her boys laugh with their half-siblings, finally broke the silence. You know, I used to hate him for what he did to you. I still kind of do. I didn't correct her. She was allowed that. But sitting here, she continued, watching them all play like nothing happened, I keep thinking maybe this is what he couldn't figure out how to do. Maybe this is what he was too cowardly to try. I took a sip of tea. Maybe. But here we are, doing it for him. Delilah cleared her throat. I didn't know what today would be. I didn't expect kindness. You didn't ask for cruelty either, I said softly. We're women. We survive the messes men leave behind. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to rewrite the ending. The sun broke through the clouds around four. The lake shimmered like someone had scattered silver coins across its surface. The children ran barefoot in the grass, and for a moment I saw what the future could be, blended in perfect healing. When they left that evening, each family took a small envelope I'd prepared. Inside were letters, not wills, not legal statements, just pieces of my heart. In Jess's, I apologized for the years I'd stayed silent, for letting her think strength meant never showing pain. In Delilah's, I told her I saw her now, as more than the woman who had my husband's children, as a mother, as a woman who had also been lied to. And in the kids, I wrote only this: family is what you choose to keep showing up for. Keep showing up. After the last car pulled away and the dusk settled like a soft blanket over the house, I sat on the porch, wrapped in that old sweater. I had thought this chapter would be about endings, but it wasn't. It was about opening the door again. Fall faded into winter. The lake froze in patches, and the trees stood bare like old bones reaching toward gray skies. I'd always hated winter, too still, too quiet, but that year it suited me. It felt honest. One afternoon, I found myself sorting through Richard's old paperwork again. Not because I needed anything from it, but because grief has a way of making you search for pieces you think you missed. That's when I found the envelope. It was sealed, tucked behind an old ledger. Addressed to a name I didn't recognize, Joanna Thatcher. I almost left it unopened, almost. But then I remembered the alias, N.R. Thatcher. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of a woman, younger than me by at least 15 years, sitting on a swing with a baby in her lap. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, Joanna, 2008. My hands trembled. My pulse thudded against my ribs. Another woman? Another child? I sat there, stunned. I thought I had uncovered all of Richard's secrets, but this was a twist I hadn't seen coming. I scanned the letter that accompanied the photo. Joanna, you asked me once if I ever regretted not leaving Eleanor. The answer is every day. But I couldn't. I stayed out of cowardice, not love. You and Emma deserved better. I failed you. I'm sorry I never made things right. If anything happens to me, the account at Central Fidelity is for Emma. It's not much, but it's what I can do. R. Emma. I folded the letter, closed my eyes, and leaned back in the chair. It was all too much. First Delilah, now Joanna. Another child, another web. He had built a kingdom of lies, and somehow I was the one left tending the garden. But this wasn't about him anymore. I called Mr. Glass the next morning. There's another account, I said, and another beneficiary. He sighed. I'll look into it. Make sure she gets it, I said. No legal tangles. Just make sure it gets to her. He paused. Eleanor, you don't have to do this. Yes, I replied. I do. Because I'd spent too long playing by someone else's rules. Too long holding up the facade of a perfect life while Richard ran around rewriting the truth. But this was my rewrite. That night, I wrote another letter. This one to Emma, wherever she was. You don't know me. I was married to your father. I didn't know about you until recently, but I believe you deserve more than silence. I hope this helps you find peace, or purpose, or both. I wish you a life free of his shadows. I didn't sign it with love. I wasn't ready for that. But I signed it with truth. And sometimes that's enough. The first snow came on a Tuesday. It blanketed the lake house in a hush that made even the trees stand still. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, and watched the flakes fall like ash, soft, slow, forgiving. The world looked cleaner somehow. Like maybe it believed in fresh starts too. The letters had been sent. The accounts updated. The trust secured. Everything Richard left undone, I finished, not because I owed him, but because I owed myself closure. Emma never replied to my letter. I didn't expect her to. Sometimes peace is silent. But Mr. Glass confirmed she received the funds, along with the explanation I had handwritten. No legalese, no grand gestures. Just truth. Jess called again a few days before Christmas. The boys made you something, she said. Can we bring it by? They arrived just after sunset, all cheeks and scarves and cocoa. Jess hugged me like she hadn't in years, tight, sincere, and a little teary. I read your letter, she whispered, as the boys ran to the fireplace to hang their handmade ornament on my tree. I didn't know how much I'd missed you. You didn't miss me, I said gently. You just forgot who I was for a while. She nodded, and for the first time, didn't try to explain it away. Delilah sent a Christmas card, just a simple one. A photo of the kids smiling in front of a tree, and a note inside that read, "Thank you for everything. We won't forget." I smiled as I pinned it to the wall beside the others. Not because I wanted a second family, but because I'd chosen to stop pretending we weren't connected. Pain links people, but healing, that's where you get to choose what kind of story you tell next. I sat by the fire that night, wrapped in a quilt older than my marriage, and thought about the woman I had been. The one who thought love was sacrifice, silent, staying. I thought about Richard, not with rage, not with nostalgia, but with something resembling acceptance. He was who he was, a man with many faces, many lives. And I was no longer one of his shadows. The house creaked in the cold. The lake glistened like a frozen sheet of silver. And I finally understood something I'd been circling for months. The ending he gave me? It was just a doorway. And the life I was building now, that was the real inheritance. Not the money, not the house, but the freedom to write my story without apology. And as I picked up my pen to continue the journal I'd been keeping, I wrote these words. He thought he was the author of our lives, but I'm the one finishing the book.